For more on this story, we are now joined in studio by Keith Khoza, spokesperson for the MEC for Human Settlements. Good evening, Keith, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, what's the purpose of the steering committee, both in Innerdale and Hammanskraal?
The steering committee has been necessitated by the fact that both actions were sporadic actions that were not anticipated. We believe that in trying to find a lasting solution, a process has to be resumed where all parties sit around the table and work together. So the steering committee is going to be consulting. There is a group representing the community, the council and the provincial government. They will look at all the issues that are raised by the community, the challenges, and chart the way forward in terms of providing a lasting solution to the problem in the area.
Now, there's a meeting coming up on Friday to start preparations on development. What are these development plans?
Well, the development plans are going to be largely in terms of developing the area. And any informal settlement needs bulk service supplies, water, electricity, and so on. But you also need to start ensuring that the space allocated is distributed equitably to all the people in the area, so that when you start building houses, it is orderly. You must identify areas where the roads will be, where the services will be located, and so on. So it is that development process that we're anticipating going forward.
Now, just speaking of going forward, how do you then decide who of the people who are evicted get proper housing? How do you determine that with people who were sort of evicted and their shacks damaged yesterday?
Well, there was an agreement yesterday that at the beginning of the year, the first people who occupied the area were 121. By the time when there were demolitions, there were about 3,505 shacks that were erected. Not all of them were demolished. And then it was agreed yesterday that the shacks that were demolished need to be re-erected with the assistance of the community that will identify the people that were moved from the area, so that we contain the number first and allow the community to settle down, and then allow the process of identifying the development needs in the area, and so that work can resume.
Keith, let's just speak about the issue of where the people came from. From 121 people in a very short space of time to about 3,000 people. How did that happen?
Well, let me put it this way. In Gauteng, annually, there is in excess of 200,000 people that are coming in from other provinces looking for opportunities. And most of them come without families, areas to stay. They identify informal settlement areas where they join in with the others. And that's how we've seen the mushrooming of informal settlements in Gauteng. And if you look at the waiting list that we deal with, it's going up instead of coming down, precisely because of that. And this is not a trend that affects Gauteng alone, but all leading cities in the world. It's an established pattern that people who look for jobs tend to migrate to major cities, and that puts pressure on social development needs, amenities, and so on. And this is what we're experiencing, that once a few people start settling in an area and other people watch, and when nothing is done, they flood in. And then all of a sudden you have an increase of informal settlements. So that's a challenge that we're facing.
And how are you dealing with that challenge? What are the plans going forward with regards to that? Because as we all know, Gauteng is the smallest province out of all the provinces in the country. How are we mitigating that as government?
We've changed the way we are going to deal with development in Gauteng. We are now talking about mega developments in corridors. We've identified 5 key corridors of new cities that will be built, where we will be building lots of houses, mixed residential areas, which would have RDP housing, social housing, gap housing, bonded properties, in the same way we've seen in Cosmos City. It was our pilot. And this is what we're going to look at, where we're now starting to build communities, but in a sensible way, where you are in a position to provide bulk services at a go, as opposed to small locations, people spread around, and you have to spread the budget that is very thin in terms of providing services in the first instance. So the mega projects, we think they're going to assist in absorbing greater numbers of people that are looking for a place to stay. However, we'll continue dealing with historic backlogs, as in the cases of whether you look at Annandale, where they say it's 27 years since any house was developed in the area. And when you listen to the community, it makes sense. I mean, people that were born 27 years ago, they are now adults. If they are unemployed, they qualify for RDP housing and so on. And that's what we're trying to deal with. That as you deal with the in-migration, you have to deal with the normal population growth in areas that requires more facilities, more support, and noting that government has a very limited budget to respond to all these needs.
Now, just speaking of Annandale, what plans do you have going forward for that community and the protest action that has been taking place there?
Well, today they told us that there is land available that is developable in Unit 10, Unit 9, and Unit 2. So the task team that has been established will go and investigate these areas. Because remember, when we build any housing, certain studies would have to be done in terms of the suitability, the condition of the area, whether it can be used for development of that nature. So with the task team that is in place, it will comprise of technical people from the department and the city, and we're also going to draw in organizations like Eskom, City Power, and Rand Water, and so on, to be part of the process of identifying the location of services, looking at the suitability of developments, and what budget would be required to do development. Already today they told us there is a list of people that had applied to be settled in the area. We are going to look at that list, clean it up, because they said it was submitted a long time ago. You might find that some people have moved on, some people might have passed on, some people might have found jobs and they no longer qualify. We need to clean up the list to get a realistic number and start planning on the basis of that realistic number.
Now, how long is this process going to take in terms of identifying those people and clearing the list on both sides, with Hammanskraal and with Annandale?
Well, to clear the list is not a problem, because remember, our systems are linked to Home Affairs, Department of Labor, and so on. So we'll use that in the first instance. But secondly, is that there is a set criteria for people who qualify for RDP housing. For instance, you've got the aged, the crippled, the unemployed, and so on. So once we confirm those, it automatically allows them to be on the list. They have to be South Africans, they must have a valid ID book, and so on. So we'll go through those exercises. It shouldn't take that much. The only thing that might take time is that once you have established that and you know you've got usable land, we then need to look at starting with bulk services and working on civils work, and after that you then start working on the top structure. So often what we do, we formalize the informal settlement or declare it part of the township, so that legally it is established properly, and then people may come with informal settlements, but once we start building, we then remove the informal settlement and put in the normal brick and mortar structures.
Now, Keith, Gauteng Human Settlements MEC Paul Mashatile has undertaken to reopen customer support centres at regional level for people who require to inquire about housing, who require assistance. As you say, that there's lists and for people to follow up and be able to know where they are in terms of the list, for instance, and how far the process is going. What's the idea for that? What's the intention for that, apart from just being a support structure? Is it a way of sort of making the people aware of what's going on within the Gauteng government?
Well, the Customer Support Center will serve two purposes. The first purpose is to ensure that our services are accessible in communities. We are going to ensure that currently we do have regional offices, but we're now starting to talk about satellite offices for far-flung areas, so that people can access our services but also be able to register, be on the waiting list, and check those who have been allocated houses, their title deeds, and so on. So we want to provide services closer to communities. But at the second level, we want to use Customer Support Center as communication points of the department, because often you find communities become unsettled. And when you drill down what are the reasons why communities are unsettled, it's because they don't have information. At times there are development plans, but they are not communicated to communities. So we also want to use that to strengthen the communication function of the department, so that at all times through CLOs and through our community workers, we've got a public liaison office to communicate with these people, but we're also now setting up a call center to ensure that people who are unable to come to our offices can use a toll-free number to find out if where in the list they are, where the next developments and so on. But equally, once we are now changing the approach. When we start building houses, we are now going to encourage people to apply for title deeds and so on. So what we're doing, we're going to intensify the communication side of our work, so that once a development starts, we don't wait for it to finish. We allocate at that point. We communicate with people and call them to come and view the development, show them where their stands are, and say to them, you need to start applying for your title deed now, so that at the end of the project, we don't only give you a happy letter, we also give you a title deed to your house.
Now, Keith, very quickly, with regards to the people who were affected in both protests, what assistance has government given to those people in both communities?
Well, at least in Annandale, nobody was evicted. It's just about them saying we need housing. In Hammanskraal, the MEC and the MMC responsible for housing in Tshwane, they've both committed to the community that they will assist those whose houses were demolished. The task team will identify what exactly the needs are of those people, because often when they demolish areas, the red ants would also take the material away, so it needs to be returned to the people who owned them, and see if anything is missing that would allow them to erect their shacks again. But the detail will be in the discussion of the task team.
And what's the reception been from the communities, especially the community in Hammanskraal?
No, the community was happy that they were stopped the evictions and the demolition of shacks. They were happy that they're going to stay in the area, but they were also happy that we're now talking beyond just stopping, we're now talking development of the area.
Keith Khoza, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You're welcome.